Should I be concerned about my baby's head shape? And you may have noticed that when your baby was born, they might have had some weird things going on with their head. And some of that is perfectly normal. So, babies do all sorts of funny things while they're growing in utero. And sometimes they become twisted in sort of suboptimal positioning or positioning that's just not quite great for their development in utero. Sometimes they get stuck in a specific place, like, for example, under your ribs, or they get squished due to lack of space, which would be more likely if you were carrying twins. But also, it can happen in conditions like low amniotic fluid. And then, of course, they're twisting and they're rotating and they're twisting some more as they make their way down and through the birth canal for birth. And sometimes they get stuck on the way out. And sometimes they need assistance with forceps or vacuums or hands or even a C section. Okay. And so there is a certain amount of cranial molding of the cranial bones that happens um, because those bones do need to move over top of each other in order for baby's head to fit, right? And so this molding is very normal and it usually does resolve on its own, but sometimes it doesn't. And often, how that molding kind of undoes or sort of resolves, so how those cranial bones start to unmold, is through a good suck. And so that suck, swallow, breathe patterning that babies are doing when they're on the breast or on the bottle, and when they have a good, strong suck and they have a good seal on the nipple of the breast or the bottle, then they can create a vacuum inside the mouth as they're extracting that milk. And that pressure helps those cranial bones to unmold. So that is one of the ways that, or one of the reasons, I guess, that your baby might have a slightly misshapen head. Now, some of the other reasons that occur can be as a result of positional sort of molding that happens from our babies being on their backs for a really long time during a 24-hour period. So not me, but in general, our society has seen an uptick in head shape discrepancies due to the Back to Sleep campaign, because babies are now spending time on their back all night long and they're not really moving that much, especially in those first few months of life. So those first 6 to 7 months, they're not really quite moving very much, right? So they're putting a lot of pressure on the back of their head for a very long period of time. Then they're also in car seats. They're also in the bouncer chairs. They're also in these other contraptions, like, the car seats that go into the stroller. And so by the end of the day, before you know it, your baby has been on their back for a large chunk of the day. And all that pressure on the back of their head can really lead to flatness. The other thing that can often contribute to head shape discrepancies or flatness on one side of the head or the other, which is often called plagiocephaly. So, plagiocephaly is when you have just flatness on one side. And that's also can either be due to positioning in utero, but it can also be due to positioning outside of utero, often as a result of something that's causing tightness in your baby's body. So, maybe that's something like torticollis, where often we think of that as tightness in the neck, but usually that torticollis is actually coming from the hips and it just refers up into the neck. So that whole side of the body is actually tight. And as a result, baby often has a side preference to one side, and they'll spend the majority of their time looking to that one side, where often to the side where there is tightness, right? Because they can lengthen this other side nicely, but they can't lengthen that tight side as well. And so they spend a lot of time in this position, and that puts a lot of pressure on one spot of their head. Okay. So this is another reason why some of that head shape discrepancy might happen. Now, the really cool part is that I went to a really fantastic place today. It's called the Rock Band Pediatric Head Shape Clinic. And this, I think, is only available in Canada right now. I'm sure they will be expanding all over the world. There are other head shape sort of remodeling orthoses kind of clinics all over the world. However, this one is using really innovative technology. Okay. So first of all, I went there and they gave me this super teeny tiny little example of their sort of head remodeling orthoses. And it's really light. And so this is much lighter and much thinner than your typical sort of helmet that babies might be wearing. And they actually showed me the difference. And it's significant. The old form of sort of head shape helmets are very, very thick plastic. They're a little bit heavier than these ones. And often they have even thicker this sort of, I guess, foam inside. The foam is pretty thick as well. So when you put this on baby's head, it ends up being quite heavy. Just adding, not this one, but the old kind of version. The other thing is that a lot of times these older versions of the helmets actually have a straight, the piece comes down here and it goes straight. And so why that's important is because that is really hard to have a rigid piece of plastic against your neck. When we're expecting babies and wanting babies to be in tummy time, guess what? They can't extend their neck backwards. They can't lift that head up because every time they do that, that plastic in the old model is going to cut right into their neck. And so this, look at how nicely shaped that is. And not only that it really takes into consideration, all of the different areas where a baby might be moving and it's not restricting any movement. But the beautiful thing about this is that this is actually made on a 3D printer, which means that they take measurements and they take a whole scan of your head and they actually put it into the 3D printer and they spit out one of these. So it is exactly fitted for your baby's head shape. And the idea behind these helmets is that it's going to put pressure on those parts that are a little bit more pronounced, and it's going to leave room for those parts that are flat, so that ultimately, with having the force of the part that's pronounced and then against the part that's flat, so we're going to push a little bit and offer a little bit of force on the part that's pronounced so that the opposite can start to extend outwards, and the whole cranial bone system, there's a lot of different cranial bones, so it's not just one bone, that whole system can start to unmold because of the different sort of places of pressure. And those places of pressure are going to be determined by the 3D scan that they do of your baby's head, but also depending on where your baby has the flatness. Is the flatness at the very, very back? If it's across the entire back of the head, that is called brachycephaly. If it is just located on one side of the head, that is called plagiocephaly. But there's also one where the head length is actually thinner and longer. So the head width is thinner and the head length is longer. So the length is longer than the width, and that is called scaphocephaly. And the reason we're concerned and want to have sort of a more rounded head shape is not just for aesthetic purposes. And I know that, of course, as parents, we want our babies to be beautiful and we want aesthetically for them to have round heads. But that is not the ultimate goal, because aesthetically round head is not necessarily what we want. What we want is actually function. That's what we're caring about, is that our babies can function and develop the way that they should be. And the thing is that with these head shape sort of discrepancies that are not unmolding on their own, those can affect so many things. It can affect latch. It can affect feeding. They can affect Even just the way that they're using their muscles of their jaw, of their cheeks, it can affect the cranial nerves, which come through the back of the head. And so, if there's any bones that are out of place, those are going to be potentially compressing those cranial nerves. And the cranial nerves, there's 12 of them. They do all sorts of things. They do things like eye movements, they do things like smell and taste and face movements. They're affecting the vagus nerve, which is our sort of that nerve in our body that really helps us to calm and regulate, and sort of that rest and digest nerve, right? And so it really helps with digestion as well. That is the longest nerve in our whole body, longest cranial nerve in our whole body, and it really innervates so many different things. And so if there's compression of any of these cranial nerves, it can really impact function. But not only that, if there's compression of the cranial bones and the brain doesn't have enough space to grow the way it should be growing, that can also cause pain and discomfort for your baby. Pressure, right? And so there's so many other things like chronic ear infections, even, that can be resulting from head shape discrepancies. So it's not just about the aesthetics, although I know that we often think like, oh, I want my baby to have a nice round head. But what we're doing with these orthotics is actually really trying to prevent some of this dysfunction that might happen, or this might be why your baby is fussy because they're just not feeling well. Their cranial rhythm, that cerebrospinal fluid, is not able to kind of smoothly and efficiently be flowing through the body, through the central nervous system. And so there's just like a generalized feeling of dis-ease. And so that might be one of the things that is impacting your baby's function, their overall well-being, their overall fussiness, for example. Okay. So there's a lot of other details, but I'm not going to go into those for now. But what I love about this company, Rock Band, and why I love them, I went today and they're all super nice, first of all, and they really care about your baby and your family. But they actually offer a scan of your baby's head for free. So you go in, they have a free consultation, they do a scan of your baby's head, and they check to make sure whether the head shape discrepancies are within those sort of normal limits or within, mild, moderate, or severe range. And then they will let you know what their recommendation is. Whether, does your baby actually need a helmet? Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe they're going to say, you know what? Let's go do more tummy time, go change the position that your baby is sleeping in, do more side lying on the side, on the non-flat side. See what kinds of changes we can make just by doing positional changes with your baby, and maybe some body work throughout the next 2 to 3 weeks. Come back and we'll do another scan. We'll see if things have improved. If things have not improved, then that might be the time when we're actually thinking potentially to get an orthosis, a head orthosis, to be molded for your specific baby. The other amazing thing that I just heard is that often these, at least in Canada, are covered by your extended health insurance. You do have to call your extended health insurance often to get the appropriate approval, because it's not necessarily listed. Like, they don't list like baby head orthoses as one of the things covered under your benefits, but it is often covered under the medical equipment section. So I highly recommend that if you have any concerns about your baby's head shape, if you're like, oh, is there a flat spot? Is there not a flat spot? Or maybe you're like, oh yeah, there's definitely a flat spot, or this just doesn't look right. Please feel free to either reach out to me and I'll direct you to the Rock Band Clinic, or you can go right to their website. It's called www.rockbandclinics.ca. I had such a great visit with them today, and I'm just so pumped that babies and families have this option available for them. So that is it. I did want to mention that if you do have concerns with your baby's body tightness potentially, or any difficulties with their development, if tummy time is really hard and your baby fusses all the time in tummy time, or they're not rolling yet or crawling or anything like that, then please do check out my Holistic Baby Development course. That will guide you through all of it. And so that will be linked below this video or along with this video, wherever you are watching. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Okay, everyone. Bye for now.